Hey everyone, Spencer Kaufman here with How To Video Channel. Today we are going to show you how to build a railroad tie retaining wall. This will be a 3-course wall that'll be built kind of at an angle here. You can see we have an old retaining wall where the landscape timbers were put vertically. So we're going to tear all these out and then make it horizontally. So I'm going to get to some labor and then I will show you what it looks like after we get them torn out and the first step of a level course. All right, so here we are. We have all of the landscape timbers torn out, and now we have a cliff edge and then a nice level surface. So this is very, very important. You need to make sure that the base of your wall is going to be very, very level. And also, because we tore out a pre-existing wall, make sure to compact this. So use a tamper or a compactor or something where you really pack that firmly. The other very important pro tip would be where these were, which is right here along the base of this cliff edge. That's not where we're going to be putting the new wall. We're going to be putting it about a foot out, and that's for several reasons. Number one, because this back area might not be firmly compacted. Number two, we want to have space between the new wall and the cliff edge so that you can backfill that with sand and gravel, a drain tile and fabric, and so that it has proper drainage. So the area that you want to be level is going to be out here about a foot out. And so once you have that done, the next step would be getting the rebar cut and putting the first course of railroad ties in, drilling some holes in them, pounding in the rebar. So we're going to show you that coming up next. All right, so we have the rebar cut. To do that, use an angle grinder with a cutting wheel. So we have a couple different lengths. Number one is 24 inches. Those are going to go through the 2 courses. This one here is a 17.5 inch. It's a 10-foot section, so we just divided it out, 17.5, and cut that into several pieces that will go all along the bottom course. So every couple feet, probably this leg here is going to be about 6 feet, and this leg here will be about 8 feet. So we'll just space them out accordingly in the bottom course, and then these, there are going to be 5 of them that we'll space out accordingly in the second course, and that will go through 2 courses. Then on the second and third course, we're going to be driving in. These are grip fast spikes, so they're 12 inches. It's a landscape spike. You can buy a whole box of them pretty cheaply, so use those. Now, what I highly recommend is this is 1/2 inch rebar, so get yourself a 1/2 inch paddle bit, one that has an impact end in case you want to have cordless. Otherwise, make sure it's a boring bit. That works really well. That has this little tip on there. So use a 1/2 inch bit to pre-drill your holes for the 1/2 inch rebar. Then you can pound that in with a sledgehammer. Same thing with these spikes. So when you're using those spikes, get yourself a bit. This is a 1/4 inch bit. If you can get a boring bit like this one, do it. If you can't find one, a spiral bit will be fine. You could even use a masonry or some other concrete bit if you really had to. But the point is, you need to be driving these railroad tie spikes and the rebar through a pre-drilled hole, because if you don't, it's going to be very troublesome to pound it through. So make sure pre-drill your holes. You might also want to get a second bit. You can always return it later because they do tend to break if the tension gets too much. So get a couple bits so you're well prepared. We're going to show you that process of putting in the timbers here, the landscape timbers or railroad ties, and drilling a couple holes and then pounding this in coming up next. All right, so here we have the first course set in. It is as level as can be, and now we have the rebar spaced out accordingly. So what's important is that each end of a railroad tie has a rebar near it, and then you space the others accordingly from there. So you can see here we have one here on this end, one on this end, and then this one is directly in the middle between these two. And then same thing here, one on this end, and then there's one way down here on that end, and then these two are spaced evenly between those two. So the next step will be to drill holes for each of these using the 1/2 inch bit. And if you have a hammer drill, that will be the best solution. But if you don't, use a regular power drill. Otherwise, you could use an impact. Be careful though if you have an impact, and of course, use proper safety precautions when using the drill. So I'm going to drill these holes, then we'll come back and I'll show you pounding in the rebar. All right, we have successfully drilled each of the holes using this hammer drill. If you have one like it, excellent. If not, don't worry, but very simple process, keeping it straight, send it down, pull it right out. Now, The thing to do is when you feel like it is breaking almost all the way through, let up a little bit so you're not drilling all the way into the dirt, because dirt will dull the bit, but at this point the creosote in a railroad tie is going to dull the bit a lot more than a dirt, so don't worry too much. So the next step after this is to set the piece of rebar in the hole and then get your sledgehammer and pound this in. There you go. So just do that on each and every one of these, and then you will be ready to put in the second course. So we'll show you what that second course looks like coming up next. All right, so here we are. The second course is layered in. Notice how we overlapped so the seams do not line up. That's very important that you do not line up on your joints. You overlap so that the wall has more strength. So also you can see here we're dealing with a railroad tie that is a little bit eaten out. Obviously that is not ideal, but that is why it is important to backfill with rock, because then the rock would fill that in and you have fabric back there to help holding back the dirt from seeping in and helping that rot even more. So make sure that you do that. Have enough space behind your wall so that you can backfill. You put fabric on the wood there, and then you backfill it with rock and maybe some sand, and then your soil. So that also helps with drainage as well. So here you can see we have the rebar laid out, spaced accordingly, basically just on any end. So right here on this end, right here on this end. You would want to put one here because you have a joint there, so you'd want one like somewhere here to go through both, but there's nothing for that to adhere to, so we'll skip that and just use a couple of nails or spikes right there. And then of course you have one on this end, one on that end, and then one in the middle here. So I'll drill the holes, go through both courses, so it'll be a little bit more drilling than before, and then pound those in. Then I'll come back and show you the next step, which will be drilling the holes for the spikes and spiking in this course for a little extra reinforcement. Once you have your rebar holes drilled and pounded in, then you can lay out the spikes. You see here we have the spikes laid on top of the second course appropriately. Make sure that when you put those out, you are not overlapping with a rebar. You can also kind of wiggle the wall to test where it might be loose. You see here I've got 3 on this end. We also have a rebar here through both courses, and then there's a rebar down here through the one single bottom course, and so 3 spikes into that section because it was a little loose. And also we can't put any spikes here, so we have a rebar here and a spike over here to help hold that end in. We may try to put a spike inside of there because the bottom is still intact, but the point is you have them all laid out, and then make sure you get your drill bit in place. And one important thing with drilling the hole is make sure to drill the hole for the spike so that it is not longer than the spike. So if your drill bit is like 10 or 12 inches, but your spike is only 10, make sure to drill about 9.5 inches or so. It would help to mark the drill bit so that you know that you're not going too deep, because if you drill that hole and it is deeper than the spike, then that spike doesn't have anything to adhere to on that end. So the other thing is, as mentioned before, make sure that your drill bit is a little smaller than that spike, and if that is the case, then that spike will hold a lot better in the wall. So now the next task will be, we'll drill the holes, and then I'll position all the spikes and show you what it looks like driving those in. Once you have all of the rebar and the spikes in place, then you are ready to put up the third course. So the third course is going to be a copy of the first. So we'll overlap here and then run the short one on this end. And then on the third course, all you need to do is put in the spikes, and then you are ready to backfill with your drain tile, rocks, fabric, gravel, etc. So that'll be it. We'll show you that third course coming up next. All right, so here we are. We have the third course on. You can see here in the middle, we are overlapping each and every direction, so the joints are not lined up. This helps solidify the structure of the wall. Also on this top course, we have a lot more spikes that are going to go in to make sure that it is good and solid. This wall is very solid. Also, it's only 3 courses, so there's not too much to worry about as long as you have the proper backing. Also, the ties are soaked in creosote. As you know, they're railroad ties, so shouldn't be too much danger there. But now what we need to do is drill each of the pilot holes for these spikes, pound them all in, and then the wall will be completed. So if you have any questions or comments, please post them below. Hopefully you like this video. Do so by clicking on that like button, and also hit the subscribe button and the bell icon to stay tuned to future videos on How To Video channel. So what I'm going to do is drill these pilot holes, pound all these in, and then I'll show you the completed product. All right, here it is. This is the completed project. So you can see here we got 3 courses up, all the nails are in, and the rebar is in. The wall looks pretty good, much better than what we started with. So now the only thing would be is to backfill it in with rock and some sand, so that way it has a proper drainage and the dirt doesn't come through. But that is up to you. That's what I would recommend. You fill it in with some landscape fabric behind, then you put in the rock, some sand, then you could put a small layer of dirt on the top if you want to put some plants up there or something like that. So that's it. Hopefully you like this video. Please hit that like button and subscribe button to stay tuned to future videos on How To Video channel. Thank you.